Hello, dear friends. This is the Style Knitting Studio. Today, I have a little blanket for you. A soft blanket for babies. I thought for a long time about what pattern to use for it. To make it two-sided, soft and quite stretchy. I thought and came up with this pattern. I don't know if it exists online and what it is called. I have no idea, friends. But I want to tell you that it is very soft, stretchy, and I believe it will be great for a blanket. It's two-sided and quite warm because it is knit like a double ribbing. I suggest we knit this blanket together. It is very easy to knit. The pattern repeat consists of 2 rows in height and 2 stitches in width. Only in the second row is there a shift. To knit our blanket we will need yarn. I was given yarn in skeins. The density is about 200 meters per 100 grams. In my opinion, I don't know the exact composition. I know there will be acrylic, and probably even wool is present. But the yarn is quite good in quality, even though it's acrylic. You will also need needles in my case, a number 4.5 75 centimeters long. A ribbon, a needle with a big eye, and a hook to hide all the ends at the end. And a pen with a notebook to make all the calculations. I used about 470 grams for the blanket. So, about half a kilo of yarn will be needed for my blanket, which measures 70 centimeters by 120 centimeters. Look, at the beginning of the row, I cast on 176 stitches using size 4.5 needles. I knit 6 rows in garter stitch. That is, I cast on all knit stitches. By the way, the universal method, the most ordinary one, is available for those who may find it difficult, don't know how to cast on stitches on needles, or how to knit garter stitch. All of this is on my channel. Please check the link under the video. In general, we have cast on stitches. We have knitted 6 rows in garter stitch. By the way, I want to note that, after I knitted the garter stitch, and started working with the main pattern, I noticed that the main pattern really pulls the fabric together. I ended up with waves here. Such peculiar ruffles. I actually liked it. So I decided not to unravel it. There are no ruffles on the side. Although I also decided to knit in garter stitch here. Here, I have 4 stitches in garter stitch, at the beginning. Of the row, I have a bunch of threads, at the end of the row. This means I knit 4 stitches in knit at the beginning and end of the row. So, that is 1 edge stitch and 3 knit stitches. Well then, friends, let me tell you how to knit the main pattern. But, we must not forget that before knitting the main pattern, we need to cast on stitches. How many to calculate, how many stitches to cast on. To do this, we knit a swatch in the main pattern. We calculate how many stitches are needed for the required size of the blanket we need. I have a blanket. I estimate that it should be 80 centimeters wide. As for the height, I will see how many threads I have. I will use them all, and it will be 80 centimeters. Well, it may even be more than 80 centimeters in height for me. But the width will be 80. Therefore, you look at what width you want for the blanket, and you calculate from your swatch how many stitches to cast on. For those who find it difficult, or do not know, here's a hint. Go ahead, take a look. I do calculations there and show 2 options for how I calculate the necessary number of stitches for my size of the garment. Alright, now let's start directly knitting the main pattern. Look friends, suppose we knitted 6 rows of garter stitch. Here's our beginning of the knitting. Yes, and we need to start knitting the main pattern. Let's say this is our first row. Our pattern consists of 2 rows in height and 2 stitches in width. That means we need a number of stitches that is a multiple of 2. Plus some additional stitches that you need for edging the blanket. I decided to knit everything in the main fabric, so I immediately knit 4 stitches in garter stitch here. 3 in garter and 1 edge stitch as the 4th. If you want it bigger, you can knit more stitches. You can also skip knitting here and edge the blanket with some other pattern. See? I knit like this, so this is my first row. We slip the edge stitch, knit 3 more stitches in knit stitch. This will be my edging. This is garter stitch. Now we begin the main pattern. Take the yarn and make a yarn over on the needle. After that, we slip the stitch. With the right needle, grab the stitch from the left needle, moving from right to left. The next stitch we knit in the knit stitch through the front loop. Afterwards, we pull the slipped stitch over the knitted stitch. Like this. Then we do another yarn over. We slip the next stitch. Then we knit the following stitch in the knit stitch through the front loop and pull the slip stitch over the knitted stitch. That's all, friends. That's it. We make a yarn over for our entire pattern. We slip the stitch like this and knit the next stitch in the knit stitch. Then we pull the slip stitch over the knitted stitch. Here we make a yarn over. Then we knit the next 2 stitches together. That is, we slip one, knit the next stitch in the knit stitch. We slip the stitch to the knitted front stitch. From 2 stitches, we got 1 plus the yarn over, so it turned out to be 2 stitches, and there were 2 stitches. That means we are not adding anything, and we just knit like this with the yarn overs. Therefore, we end up with this lacy fabric. We yarn over, slip this yarn over stitch, and knit the next front stitch. Next, we drop this stitch onto the knitted front stitch. I am combining 2 actions. Now, I will show you, and it turns out to be very quick to knit. Look, I yarn over and simultaneously grab this next stitch and slip it. Then I knit the next one as a front stitch, then drop this slipped stitch onto the knitted front stitch. So, it turns out instead of doing a yarn over and then slipping, with one movement, we yarn over and slip. Next, we knit the front stitch, as usual, and drop. Just like that, friends, it is very easy to knit to the end of the row. At the end, we will meet. I will finish the height of the row and show you how to knit there. So, we slip, knit the front stitch, and drop the slipped stitch onto the knitted front stitch. Then again, we slip along with the yarn over. We knit the next one as a front stitch, then the slipped stitch. We do not touch the yarn over, just drop the slipped stitch onto the knitted front stitch. Or if it is difficult for you, then we yarn over, slip the next one and knit the next stitch as a front stitch. We drop the slipped stitch onto the knitted one. We are all knitting to the end of the row. Here is the end of the row. I have 4 stitches left. We knit them as front stitches through the front loop. The last one is knit as a purl with the granny technique onto the stitch. That's how the first row is knitted. We move on to the second row. Here we slip the first edge stitch. Next we knit 3 stitches as front stitches. This is our garter stitch for the front loop. Next, we shift the pattern. That is, we knit the same way, just shifted. This is necessary to create these angled stitches and lace. So, what do we do in the second row? We knit the first stitch purlwise through the front loop. Next we proceed similarly. We make a yarn over. We slip the stitch, we knit the next stitch purlwise and pass the slipped stitch over the knitted purl. That is, we do the same as in the first row. The only difference is that at the beginning and the end of the row, we will knit one stitch purlwise. That is, the first and last stitch of the second row. Otherwise we knit everything the same. We slip with a yarn over, then we knit purlwise through the front loop. We pass the slipped stitch over the knitted purl. This way we will knit until the end of the row. I will show you how I knit. Here's the end of the second row. We already have one yarn over and 4 of my last stitches, and one yarn over. We knit this yarn over purlwise through the back loop. This is to prevent a hole from forming here. Now, I knit my 3 stitches purlwise and the last 3 stitches, the 4th is my edge stitch. That's it, friends, our pattern is finished. We repeat from the first to the second row, and we will knit to the desired length. In the end, we will meet, and I will tell you how I switch to garter stitch and how I finish my blanket. Well, dear friends, finally I have finished my blanket. I want to say right away that the width of the border on both sides is 2 centimeters. For your reference, we have reached the desired height, and I did not change the size of the needles. I knitted the entire blanket using needles 4.75 millimeters, and as soon as we counted that we reached the desired length, we immediately start knitting the next row in garter stitch. That is, all stitches purlwise. The reverse next row is again all loops in knit stitches. I knit 6 rows in knit stitches with garter stitch, and that's it. Next, I close the last row using the stitch transfer method. So, we slip the first one, for example, at the beginning of the row, we slip the edge stitch, knit the second stitch knitwise, and pull the edge stitch over the knit stitch on top. Then we again slip the next stitch. After that, we knit the next one knitwise and pull the slipped stitch over the knitted one. Thus, I closed the entire row, and this type of closure resulted in a braid, and as I mentioned, I have ruffles at the beginning and the end of the blanket, but there are no ruffles on the sides. That's all, dear friends. I cannot show the blanket in its unfolded state right now. Look at the beginning of the video. Because it turned out to be very large, around 70 centimeters by 120 centimeters, it turned out to be 70 in width, although I thought it would be 80. Friends, also one more thing. I measured my sample. So, before we start knitting, we knit a sample. I measured it, knitted it, and calculated the number of stitches I need to cast on. I started knitting, knitted quite a lot, and it shrank and constricted. I counted on 80 centimeters in width, but it narrowed quite a bit, that is. Keep in mind that this stitch pattern tightens a lot. It acts like ribbing, so you need to cast on more stitches. In order for your width to be correct, my blanket turned out not to be 80 centimeters but 70 in width. The length is 120 centimeters. That's all, dear friends. Knit with pleasure. Also subscribe, like, chat with me in the comments, and of course, always stay stylish. Wishing everyone goodness.